Welcome back to the South Carolina Manufacturing Conference and Expo here on SC Biz TV. Two reminders for those just joining us. Be sure to visit our virtual expo where more than 100 exhibitors are displaying their wares, and check out a nice selection of training courses for manufacturing employees, HR executives, and other industry leaders, and that's on scbizupskill.com. Those training courses are brought to you by the South Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership and HR Bridging. Recently, the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness released the results of the 2020 Logistics Economic Impact Study. The study was completed by University of South Carolina research economist Joey Von Nessen. Earlier in this conference, you may have seen Joey present the state's Aerospace Economic Impact Study. In case you missed that one, it's archived on SC Biz TV, and you can watch it at your leisure. Logistics is a $37 billion industry in South Carolina. It has been thriving even during these unprecedented times, but let's define thriving and just what are the prospects for the industry as we move forward. Taylor Jackson is going to answer those questions for us. Taylor is the Director of Logistics for the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, and she will be presenting the state's Logistics Economic Impact Study. Watch this short message, and then you'll see Taylor's presentation. At the conclusion, I'll be joined by Dave Edwards here in just a little bit. He is the President and CEO of the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport District and the Chair of the state's Logistics Executive Committee. Dave will share his thoughts about the study. Enjoy the presentation, everyone, and we'll see you right back here in about 15 minutes.
Hi, good day. My name is Taylor Jackson, and I'm the Director of SC Logistics at the Council on Competitiveness. We are a unique private and public collaborative effort to strengthen and promote our state's economy, create jobs, attract investment, and become a global leader in the logistics industry. Our economy has grown significantly in the last 2 decades, and projections forecast an even stronger economic performance in the future. We first released our first economic study in 2017. It showed the size and scope of logistics in South Carolina. However, by 2040, we are estimated to move 61% more freight through South Carolina. So we want to focus on Dr. Joey Von Nessen and his 2020 economic impact of South Carolina logistics in the state. So as you can see here, the South Carolina employment growth by industry has really grown from 2019 to 2020. However, with the pandemic, there are, promising things, especially for the transportation sector, that you can see here. We can see the South Carolina employment growth trends moving up, specifically in the transportation and warehousing industry, at an average rate of 2.4% compared to the negative 5.1% that South Carolina is going through. So as you can see, though, there is promise in this, and the 2020 job recovery in South Carolina is outpacing the rest of the nation. A lot of this is also due to consumer spending. As more things move online and as we go through online retail, you're going to see this number continually increase. So today's goals is to document the current economic impact of SC Logistics on the Palmetto State and to examine the evolution of SC Logistics over time given ongoing changes in the market dynamics. So to define the logistics cluster, we looked at occupations, not specific industries. So we looked at internal and external provider functions and embedded functions. So for example, the embedded functions exist within a company regardless of which industry the company is. Think about supply chain managers, logisticians, etc. For the internal and external providers, these are more transportation-based. They exist primarily to transport raw materials and our final products from one firm to another. So, for example, a truck driver that works for Walmart versus a truck driver working specifically for a trucking company. So in this case, the Walmart truck driver would be an internal provider. So here we break out the functions, again, not getting very detailed, but giving you a flavor of what these occupations look like and how they are distributed. We find the total direct employment in South Carolina logistics approximately 140,000. So again, this is about a small number for the embedded functions. About 3% of the total employment number are these logisticians and supply chain managers, and we will end up circling back to this. So as you can see, the internal providers comprise the majority of the employment base, about 87,807. One reason why it is so important to define logistics as a set of occupations and not industry. So many work in logistics, but working for companies that do not specifically provide transportation services. So again, I'll go back to the Walmart truck driver. Clearly working in a logistics space, but also working in an adjacent industry. So here we can look at the employment growth over time. We see that a majority of the logistics-related growth in South Carolina is due to the higher overall demand for transportation. The overall employment growth has been very strong, about 7% 2017 to 2020, whereas the state average is about 2.5%. So again, we're seeing logistics perform well higher than the state average. Most of this growth is generated by external provider firms that are strictly in the business of transportation industries. The reason for this is very simple. We have seen an expansion of the South Carolina economy and the U.S. economy in the latter part of the decade. The second half of the decade is a significant uptick, partly because of consumer spending. So let's look at the actual economic impact values overall. What are the really big numbers coming out of this study? So here you see the total employment, again, approximately 140,000 people. Total compensation is $6.8 billion. This includes labor income, wages, and benefits paid to the employees themselves. And the total economic impact that logistics has on South Carolina is $37.2 billion. All three numbers represent growth rates that are in excess of the state's average. So as you can see, the employment has been about a 7% annual growth in the last 3 years since our first study came out. Total compensation is a 4.4% growth, and a total economic output of 4%. So we can look at these trends and we can see that an increase in demand is fueling a lot of this growth. Specifically the U.S. average hourly earnings. You can see a clear shift in the growth rate of the first half of the decade and the second half of the decade. Looking at these trends, you can see a very clear difference. And it's also a natural outcome that we expect. We can also look at the impacts for the average wage comparisons, just what this employee base really means to the state. So as you can see, the embedded and provider, and we can also compare and look at the aggregate measure of the 140,000 employees, which is the third bar from the top. We can then compare this to the average wage in South Carolina as a whole. So as you can see, it's about a 7% wage premium to all jobs across the state. So this means logistics as a whole is bringing up the average wage for South Carolina. Again, it's a very large difference between the salary between the direct jobs within the provider functions versus the direct jobs within the embedded functions. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the evolution of SC Logistics. So we've talked about some of the big numbers and how we have seen growth from 2017 to 2020, but I also want to talk specifically about how it relates to the other clusters and the interplay between logistics and these industries. There's specifically a lot more interplay today, and we're going to see a lot more growth in this industry in the next decade. So two specific clusters that we're going to talk today about is SC Tech and advanced manufacturing. So if we kind of want to move from the bottom up and focus on advanced manufacturing, what many of us know is that advanced manufacturing has been primarily responsible for the state's growth. It largely relies on a thriving logistics cluster in order to do well, and the support is incredibly important for the manufacturing industry. Similar fashion, you can look at SC Logistics and SC Tech, because just as the relationship between manufacturing and logistics itself is becoming more reliant on technology and technology companies in South Carolina. And what you can see here is in the past decade, the percentage of total expenditures made with the tech industry to logistics has tripled over the past decade. So on average, we find that logistics have come to rely significantly more on tech companies. We can also look at the overall percentage of the growth rate for the advanced manufacturing. It's significantly more than the average South Carolina business, about twice the amount. Again, we replicated this from our 2017 study, and this relationship has grown stronger, but it is a long-standing relationship. So we can also look at the trends among South Carolina external provider firms. So we see here that, again, there's been a logistics employment growth that has outpaced the South Carolina employment growth in the past decade. We can also look at South Carolina comparing to other states in the Southeast. If you focus on just the last few years, thinking about the second half of this current economic expansion, South Carolina has begun to outpace the Southeast as a whole. So in this ranking, you can see that we rank the logistics cluster as 9th in the Southeast from 2010 to 2016. But when we expand out to 2019, we jump from 9th to 4th. So you can see there's, again, a significant increase with the recent economic expansion. And South Carolina has been performing better than the national average with direct implications to logistics growth. So why we want to set the stage for moving ahead and how we are going to be evolving with advanced manufacturing and tech, and how we are going to grow the cluster as a whole and mirror the trends we are seeing. So if we want to reconsider the embedded functions, supply chains, logisticians, related occupations, we want to revisit that embedded functions only encompass about 3% of the job. And while this may seem small, but it's in line with what we expect as the cluster as a whole from what you can see here. So we're right in the middle of the pack. It's a pretty average rate. But if you look at the growth in the embedded functions and the growth in South Carolina, you get a very different picture. Overwhelmingly ranked number 1, almost twice the rate as Florida, which is ranked number 2. So far and away, this puts us off to a very good start moving forward. What we will find as we see tech evolve and automation, we are going to see that the employment base will slowly move away from the provider functions to the embedded functions. Provider functions are more based around transportation services, and again, embedded is more about the strategic development for the supply chain. The keys for growth moving forward is to navigate what this will look like and how we can better facilitate this change as we see the technological development and how we are working on to successfully manage this relationship and how we can grow. Again, we are off to a good start on already growing the embedded area, and the future logistics looks very promising. So, some of the big numbers that we saw. Again, we saw a growth rate of about 60 million in total employment and about 7 billion in total economic impact. The salary averages are going up, and again, the focus needs to be specifically on growing these embedded functions with education and workforce development. We are headed in the right direction for the logistics industry, and the interconnectivity of logistics in our advanced manufacturing and technology sector will be key moving forward. All right, thanks so much.
All right, folks, welcome back. You just finished watching the 2020 South Carolina Logistics Economic Impact Study presented by Taylor Jackson. Again, Taylor is the Director of Logistics at the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness. The study was completed by University of South Carolina research economist Joey Von Nessen. Joining me now to provide some reaction and discuss the study's findings is Dave Edwards. Dave is the President and CEO of the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport District and the Chair of the state's Logistics Executive Committee. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. Great to be here.
It is good to have you here. Thanks for stopping by. I know you were busy. Let's talk logistics. I'll tell you what, I just watched that, and here's my takeaway. Logistics industry is growing. Employment growth outpacing South Carolina. Jobs pay pretty good. Impact in the billions of dollars annually, and future looks good. That about cover it?
It does cover it. We've come a long way in the last 10 years, and when you look at the future, in particular, from now over the next 10 years to 20 years, it's another 17.5% growth.
Right.
And so I think it really goes to show what in the rollout of this study of the important role that logistics plays in the state of South Carolina. And I don't think that anyone would have thought that the industry would generate the kind of economic impact that it generates for the state.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I saw the study. Of course, being involved in manufacturing, as we are here at SC Biz in our manufacturing conference, I was aware of it to some degree, but not to what I saw. So I was a little bit surprised. Before we get into more of that, though, tell me, you are the chair of the state's Logistics Executive Committee, right?
SC Logistics.
SC Logistics. Thank you. What does that mean? What do you do? How big is that committee, and what do you guys do?
Well, we have an executive committee, and that committee gets together every few months. We have a greater board group that also comes together every quarter, roughly. And we talk about logistics in the state. What are the needs? Where do we need to go? What are the next steps? Where are the challenges for us? So, it usually revolves around infrastructure is a big piece. We need to continue to improve our infrastructure in the state. It is about, for some, employment. So when you look at, in particularly, the trucking industry, trying to get drivers in that industry, extremely difficult, insurance challenges, and the like, even though they're very well-paying jobs in the trucking industry.
Let's talk about the trucking industry for a second. Total employment in the industry, reading here, 140,000 folks, 29,000 of those are truck drivers. How many should it be, and how many can we accommodate?
Well, I don't know that I have the exact number on that, Rick, but I don't think there's any question that the trucking industry would take every driver they could get these days. But they need the infrastructure to be able to run those trucks, and that's some of our problems logistically throughout the state, is some of our road infrastructure and how you get from point A to point B. Isn't always as convenient, and it's in some places extremely congested. So those are some challenges we still need to resolve.
Average logistics job pays $45,000. Is that good?
Well, actually, I think the range on that is 45 to about 75, 78. So it kind of depends on what sector you're in, what particular job position. I mean, some, as an example, of these truck driving jobs are paying $80,000 and $100,000 a year.
That's right.
So.
That's right. Maybe I'll drive a truck on the weekends, right? Taylor talked about in the study, she talked about the difference between embedded and non-embedded functions. Explain that to me.
I'll do my best. When we talk about non-embedded, we're really talking about provider functions. Those are really like the truck drivers, the transportation piece. The embedded functions are if you're working for a logistics company processing paperwork that happens to be logistics oriented. Those are internal logistics functions that are going on. So they're within a company rather than actually providing that transportation from point A to point B.
You know, and I'm skipping around here a little bit, but as things come to my mind, we know the hospitality industry has been completely decimated, of course, by what we're going through now, COVID and the pandemic.
It's hurt air travel too a little bit.
It has hurt us a little bit as well, and you a whole lot, and you and I have discussed that. Where was I, Dave? You threw me.
Sorry about that, Rick.
No worries. But you know, logistics as well. When all this started, there was a lot of talk about logistics being really, really impacted. So one of the things that I was surprised about is to see that employment figures right now, employment rate figures for the logistics industry look good. Surprised to see it.
Well, I think we've seen that kind of across the board in logistics, what's going on. In this post-COVID era, we've seen product movement increase. We've seen the need, as an example, for air cargo increase during this time. And I think that's just folks are staying home. There's got to be more movement of product. That product has to get from point A to point B. And so the need for people in those jobs and those logistics jobs have become even more important than it was pre-COVID.
You know, employment growth rate, and I'm not sure that I'm going to remember exactly what Taylor said, but it seems like logistics was up over the last few years to several years by about 7% or so, compared to the state average of 2.5%, something like that. What's driving that? I mean, because that is a big difference. Compared to the state as an average?
Well, I think when you just look at our state and you look at the manufacturing that's in the state and the need, again, to move product, whether that's inbound product for the manufacturing product process or outbound finished product to other destinations, we've just continued to grow in that arena, and it has necessitated the need for that growth in the logistics sector. You know, when you look at South Carolina as well, and you look at the Southeast, and you look at the cities that are competitive in the logistics arena, we have 3 of the top 5 most competitive cities right here in South Carolina, right. Between Charleston, Greenville, and Dillon.
Dillon's the third one.
That's right.
And why is that?
Well, I think it has a little bit to do with something they built over there.
Let's talk about Boeing. Big announcement from Boeing here very recently. And so that eventually will mean 1,000 jobs, of course, that will come here. Who knows when exactly that they'll come here, because let's face it, Boeing needs to save a little money for a bit, right? So it's probably going to be delayed. I'm going to assume that there's going to be suppliers that follow them here. I'm going to assume that some won't, and new suppliers will be hired. How's that going to affect the logistics industry as a whole in the state? Well,
I think it'll have a ripple effect across the state. I think as we've seen from Boeing's growth down in the Charleston and the Low Country, that eventually has expanded its way and suppliers up to the upstate as well. So I think we will see that occur with this additional commitment to make all of the 787s here in the state of South Carolina going forward. Big win for the state and a big win for logistics as well, because it's going to require more folks.
You know what, as big as a win as it was for us in South Carolina, it was a pretty big loss for the folks in Washington State. They're losing a whole lot of jobs there. So sorry to see that, but I'd rather be on the good end than the bad end.
Absolutely.
Here's another one that I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to remember what Taylor said exactly, but I remember she showed a chart. And the chart showed how the states were ranked in terms of growth over the past decade or so. And South Carolina ranked somewhere around 9th or 10th.
Right.
However, over the last few years, it's really climbing those charts, right? And now it's ranked 3rd, and I forget the states in front of it.
Right.
what states are? Do you remember?
You know,
Florida,
I'm
maybe?
trying to Florida, North Carolina, Kentucky, I think
that's
is
right.
in there, and then I think we sit number 4.
That's right. Yeah. So what is driving that, and how long might we continue to climb those ranks? I think Florida's way up though. But
Well, I think it's, you know, I think if you look at the previous 10 years, we were further down in the mix, but this last 10 years, we've made some extremely positive strides in that growth here in the Southeast. I think a lot of it has to do with the port. Obviously, the port's growth and what the Port of Charleston has done over the years has been significant, and especially, and if you talk about the last 10 years, the inland port. If you look at, you know, if I can toot our own horn and what we're doing at the airport and air cargo, you know, we've made significant strides in the last 10 years in standing up long-haul international cargo service to Europe, so that's been big. We've seen expansions of UPS down in Colombia as an example with their air freight facility there as well. So I think when you just, and then you just look at the manufacturing growth in and around the state over the last 10 years, which has increased as well. You know, it's kudos to the state, kudos to commerce in helping to bring strong businesses here to South Carolina, which is putting us in that position that we're in today to be in that top 4, top 5 in growth here in the Southeast.
you know, I would be remiss, Dave, if I didn't ask the president of the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport what air travel was doing these days. We talked about it not too long ago, and I know it's a tough time, but give our viewers just a little summary on where you stand right now.
Well, the quick snippet is we make progress every day. For the month of September, we were up to about 35% of normal traffic levels. And when we look at where we're running the first 6 days here of October, this is how closely we're looking at this on a continuing basis to the first 6 days of September, we're running about 10% ahead month over month over that period of time. So things are looking up. They're slow to gain some traction, but we're still hoping to be at 50% of traffic by the end of the year, which if we can hit that, that'll be a positive mark for us.
If I remember right, at one point you were down 90% in the
96.
beginning months. 90, you know exactly
That's
what it
right.
was. So I suppose where you are right now is just short of a miracle compared to where you were a few months back.
Things are feeling a bit better,
Yeah.
and we hope that trend is going to continue. We got to keep this virus harnessed as best we can and get a vaccine out there so we can get our business travelers in particular traveling again.
That's right. Dave, okay, let's end it talking about the future a little bit. We never know where the future is going to take us, but I tell you what, let's put COVID in our rearview mirror just a little bit and look toward the future. Things were going really well for us several months back, right?
Absolutely.
Let's just say we get through this and all is well. Where do you see us in the next couple of years from a logistics perspective?
Well, I think when you look at the plan and really the study, what it showed is, again, the next 10 to 20 years, I think is nothing but up for South Carolina. There's some things we have to do. I know I've harped on infrastructure a couple of times, so we really need DOT, South Carolina DOT's help in order to make sure that we can deliver the product to where it needs to go and in a timely and a safe and efficient manner. And I think, that means dealing with some of our roads and bridges and other things that are out there. And I think to date they've been working hard at that, but we still have a ways to go in order to get to where we need to be. And then I think investment, continuing investment in the state in other modes, whether whether it's air, whether it's sea, whether it's providing better capabilities for rail as well around the state. All of those things are important, especially on the short haul piece on rail.
Right. Good stuff. Thank you for joining us.
Rick, great to see you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You too. That is Dave Edwards. He is the president and CEO of the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport District, sharing a little bit of industry reaction on the logistics study that just came back. And so, Dave, once again, thank you. Folks, we'll be right back on SC Biz TV just in a few minutes.
Choate Construction Company is your leader in industrial construction. With over 60 million square feet of industrial facilities constructed, our team of professionals can show you how we're building, renovating, and expanding facilities for our clients in ways that save money, create opportunities, and advance their business goals. When details count the most, we've got your next project covered.